In my family, becoming a man means driving alone across the country in my grandfather's old car. They said it was tradition, a rite of passage. But after finding my grandfather's journal, I realized the truth. It's not a tradition. It's a curse. This is the story of a haunted road, a car that records the past, and the dark secret my bloodline tried to forget. The men in my family have a tradition, a rite of passage, my dad called it. When a boy becomes a man, he takes a journey in my grandfather's car, a cross-country trip, alone, to connect with the past. My grandfather died before I was born, so for me it was supposed to be a way to connect with the man I never knew, a way to understand my roots. Now, I think it was a test. And I don't know if I passed or failed. The car itself is a relic, a 1968 Ford Falcon, a heavy beast of seafoam green, steel, and chrome. The inside smells of old vinyl, stale pipe tobacco, and something else, something faintly metallic and sad, like old blood. There's no GPS, no Bluetooth, no screen of any kind. Just a rumbling engine, a steering wheel the size of a ship's helm, and an old AM/FM radio with a single, crackling speaker in the dash. I set off 2 weeks ago, with a worn paper map unfolded on the passenger seat beside me. The first few days were incredible. Just me, the open road, and the ghosts of old rock and roll on the radio. It was the time for me to go through the road. Looking at the map, I saw it, a thin, red line designated a state highway that cut a perfectly straight 200-mile slash through a vast, dark green patch of national forest. The turnoff was unassuming, just a faded green sign pointing down a 2-lane blacktop that was immediately swallowed by a canopy of ancient, towering pine trees. The air grew cooler. The sunlight dimmed, filtered through the dense needles overhead. Within 10 minutes, I hadn't seen another car. The road was a lonely, empty ribbon unfurling into the wilderness. That's when the radio started acting up. At first, it was just static, the familiar hiss of a signal lost to distance and geography. But then, through the static, a voice crackled to life. It was a news anchor, his voice crisp and urgent, talking about naval blockades and tensions in Cuba. The broadcast lasted for about 30 seconds, then dissolved back into static. Weird. I twisted the dial, but all I got was more hissing. A few miles later, it happened again. A jingle, upbeat and cheerful, for a brand of soda I vaguely remembered my parents talking about. One that hadn't been on shelves since the 70s. I dismissed it as atmospheric bounce. I'd heard of it happening in remote areas. Radio waves from God nowhere, trapped in the ionosphere, sometimes bouncing back down in just the right conditions. It was a strange, atmospheric quirk, a cool story to tell later. But the broadcasts kept coming, and they started to change. They became more intimate. I heard a mother humming a lullaby, a gentle, wordless tune full of so much love it made my chest ache. I heard a heated argument between two men, their voices sharp and angry, though I couldn't make out the words. They weren't broadcasts anymore. They weren't something else. The feeling in the car shifted from curiosity to a low, humming unease. The road stretched on, empty and unchanging. Then, up ahead, I saw a building. It was an old, dilapidated diner, its sign faded and peeling, its windows boarded up. It looked like it had been abandoned for half a century. As I drove past, the radio erupted. It wasn't a voice this time. It was a cacophony of sound. The clatter of cutlery on ceramic plates, the sizzle of a grill, the low murmur of conversation, and over it all, the clear, cheerful voice of a waitress asking, "What'll it be, hun?" It was so real, so vibrant, I could almost smell the greasy spoon coffee. It lasted for the 10 seconds it took to pass the diner, and then it vanished, replaced by the familiar hiss of static. My heart was pounding. That wasn't some physical phenomena. A few miles later, I passed a wide clearing with a single, massive, gnarled oak tree in the center. As the car drew level with it, the radio crackled again. This time it was the sound of children laughing, pure, unadulterated joy. And underneath it, the steady, rhythmic creak, creak, creak of a tire swing. I looked at the tree. There was no swing, just a thick, heavy branch, empty against the gray sky. The realization hit me hard. The radio wasn't picking up random signals from the sky. It was picking them up from the ground, from the road itself. It was playing back moments, memories, that had happened in the exact locations I was passing. This entire desolate stretch of highway, it was a recording. And this car, my grandfather's car, was the playback device. A morbid curiosity, stronger than my fear, took hold. I started to experiment. I slowed the car to a crawl. I passed an old collapsed barn, its roof caved in, its timbers rotting. The radio filled with the frantic, desperate voice of a man praying, begging for mercy, as the sound of a roaring thunderstorm raged around him. The storm wasn't real. The sky above me was a flat, overcast gray. But in the car, I could almost feel the thunder shake my bones. I stopped the car completely. The prayer faded. I put it in reverse, backed up 10 feet. The prayer started again, mid-sentence. I was controlling it. I was scrubbing through the timeline of this place. Up ahead, the road curved sharply around a deep, rocky ravine. A rusty, mangled section of guardrail was the only sign of trouble. As I approached, a knot of ice formed in my stomach. I almost turned the radio off. I couldn't. The static gave way to the screech of tires on wet pavement. It was a horrifying, high-pitched squeal of rubber losing its grip. It was followed by a single, sharp, female scream, a sound of pure, final terror, cut off abruptly by a sickening crunch of metal on rock. And then, silence. A profound, heavy, listening silence that was worse than the scream itself. I felt physically cold. The dread wasn't just in my head anymore. It was a physical sensation, seeping into me from the old vinyl of the seats, through the steering wheel into my hands. This wasn't just a recording. The emotions were real. The pain, the fear, the joy. They were imprinted here. I had to get out, just for a minute. I pulled the car over onto the gravel shoulder, my hands shaking. I needed fresh air. I needed to escape the claustrophobic intimacy of these ghosts. I killed the engine, and the silence was a relief. I sat there for a long time, just breathing. My eyes scanned the simple, primitive dashboard. The glove compartment. I don't know why I opened it. Maybe I was just looking for a distraction. Inside, beneath a stack of old gas receipts and a tire pressure gauge, was a small leather-bound journal. It was my grandfather's. His name was embossed in faded gold on the cover. With trembling fingers, I opened it. The pages were filled with his neat, looping handwriting. The first few entries were about the car, about his love for driving. Then, the entries started to be about this road. October 12, 1971. Started my rite of passage today. A state highway that cuts through the old forest. The map calls it Route 9, but it feels older than that. There's a strange quality to the air here. The radio keeps picking up old signals, like echoes. I must be coming back this way. October 15th, 1971. It's not echoes. It's the road. I've started calling it the hollow. It holds on to things, voices, moments. I passed the old Miller farm today and heard Old Man Miller yelling at his son, clear as day. Miller's been dead 20 years. This road, it remembers. I flipped through the pages. The entries became more frequent, more obsessive. He was driving the road regularly, listening, cataloging the memories he found. He was as fascinated as I had been, but then, the tone of the final entries changed. The neat cursive became a frantic, almost illegible scrawl. It records. It takes. I was out here last week, after a terrible fight with my wife. I was so angry, so full of rage. Today, I drove past the same spot, and I heard it. I heard myself. I heard my own words, my own anger echoing back at me from the static. It took a piece of me. It recorded my pain, and now it plays it back. Any strong emotion, any peak of human experience, it gets imprinted. It feeds the hollow. The last entry was written on a page that was tear-stained and smudged. September 5th, 1992. It's our blood. It has to be. I found the old county records, the ones they keep in the church basement. This land wasn't empty. Before it was a forest, before it was a road, it belonged to a tribe. Our ancestors, when they first settled this valley, they cleared them out. That was the phrase in the old letters, cleared them out. It wasn't a treaty, it wasn't a sale, it was a slaughter, a genocide. We built our lives on their graves, and this road cuts right through the heart of their burial ground. It's not just playing back memories, it's playing back their suffering, an endless loop of their final agony. And it's a curse for us, for our bloodline. The car, this damn car, it's an amplifier. It attunes us to their pain. This rite of passage, it isn't about connecting with us. It's about binding us to them, to their suffering. The road demands a witness from the bloodline of the usurpers. It demands we listen. I dropped the journal. My blood had turned to ice. The rite of passage, the connection to the past. It was all a lie. A beautiful, romantic story to cover up a horrifying, ugly truth. I looked up into the rearview mirror. The road behind me seemed to shimmer, the image of the forest wavering like a heat haze. The car, which had been running perfectly, suddenly sputtered, coughed. The engine died. The radio crackled to life, but it wasn't a memory this time. It was a low, expectant hum, a waiting sound. And in the mirror, I saw them. Far behind me, where the road met the horizon, figures began to appear. Dozens of them, then hundreds. They were on horseback, dark, wrathful silhouettes against the gray sky. They began to ride towards me, moving with an unnatural speed. They were screaming, a sound that came not through the radio, but through the very air, a chorus of rage and pain in a language I didn't know but understood perfectly. Between the trees, women, children, old men, their bodies were torn, mutilated, their faces were masks of unending agony, and they were all looking at me. They weren't just ghosts, they were accusations. They were raising their spectral, broken hands, pointing at me, their mouths open in silent screams that I could feel in my soul. My own scream was a raw, terrified sound. I turned the key in the ignition, praying. The engine caught, roaring back to life. I stomped on the accelerator, and the old Falcon fishtailed on the gravel before finding purchase on the asphalt. I flew down that road, the army of spectral riders gaining on me in the rearview mirror, the suffering faces of the dead flashing past my windows. The road ahead seemed to stretch into infinity. The car rattled and shook, pushed to its absolute limit. The humming from the radio grew louder, more intense, a sound that felt like it was trying to shake my skull apart. I saw a sign up ahead, a modern, reflective green sign for the interstate, the end of the hollow. I shot past it, crossing some invisible line, and everything stopped. The riders in my mirror vanished, the figures in the woods were gone, the humming from the radio cut out, replaced by a profound, deafening silence. I kept driving for another mile before pulling over, my body shaking so violently I could barely control the car. I sat there gasping for air, the silence a welcome blanket. Then, the radio crackled one last time. It was a voice, an old man's voice full of a weariness so deep it felt ancient. It was a voice I had never heard, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that it was my grandfather. "Now you know," he whispered, his voice a ghost in the machine. "Now you carry it too. The road remembers. The road always remembers. And one day, son, for one of us, for one of our blood, it won't be enough to just listen. One day, it will claim its payment." The radio went silent, and I was alone. But I know I'm not. I can still feel it. A cold spot in my soul. The rite of passage is complete. I've connected with my ancestors, and I am now bound to their crime. A witness to their sin, just waiting for the day the road decides it's my turn to become another one of its recordings.